All right, as crypto chaos and the markets continue to react, the big question is, where is Bitcoin going to fall to, and will it maybe just do a bounce and start a different kind of recovery? We're going to jump into all that good stuff for you guys today, have some sentiment for you, break down some analysis, and dive into a bunch of stories I think you guys are going to want to listen in on. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. Let's get into it. I want to thank our sponsor today. That is Binance US. Check out Binance US. If you're looking at trading and converting Bitcoin right now, you can do it with zero fees, so it's a pretty easy step. They've done a lot of new additional features within Binance US. I am a customer of theirs, and I do like some of the things that they've brought to to the table. They've got some staking over there, so if you're looking at more long-term plays, but you can get into all of that stuff. Just drop over in there to their buy, sell, convert. You can go right into the staking section of their website and see all of their tokens that are available. Make sure and use our link in the description below because it does help the channel out. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of things for what's happening in the market. And I just want to jump right to it, and this is coming over from Watcher Guru. Just in, FTX US says trading may be halted in coming days. This is FTX US in halting days, warning users to close any positions. So this is interesting that they're even giving a heads up on this. But pretty interesting stuff. If you're in FTX US right now, I just recommend that you make your exit as quickly as you can. I think that is something that we'll probably see playing out in the next few weeks as this plays into kind of the future here. But there's a lot happening right now. Obviously, inflation holds a big grip on the US economy right now in October. Let me pause that. There we go. And some of this is through a couple of key areas, all right? Man, these crazy ads. Whew. All right. Both lower than 8% headline figure, and then 0.5% monthly increase forecasted by Refinitiv economists, and potentially reassuring signs of the Federal Reserve as it tries to tame runaway inflation. Now, there's some issues with this in the sense of a 0.4. If you kind of scale this out, and I'll show you a tweet from Peter Schiff here in a minute, but if you kind of scale this out, it still doesn't necessarily get the Fed back to an inflation number that they're comfortable with, which is 2%. We talk about 3% being maybe the new target. If that were the case, then it might actually be getting into a zone of a potential bottom in terms of inflation. That's providing that we don't continue to see additional inflation numbers coming in. So a lot of this is still very early in the cycle. And I know a lot of people, when they look at this, maybe this does adjust in on where the Fed might be looking. If you look at the chart right here, it kind of just shows over the decade, obviously, but right here is what we're talking about in 2023 and what they think might be in 2023 as we start to see a small correction here, possibly going down back into where I think is where we're going to hang all the way through next year, is somewhere in the 5% range. And even at that, that's still almost, over double what the Fed has been trying to get to. So there's still a lot of problems there because of the scenarios that this places out. Even with slowdown inflation, they're talking about quite a bit of a move here. And shelter costs, which accounted for 40% of the core inflation increase, rose 0.7 for the month and are up 6.9 over the past year. So fastest annual increase since 82. 82 was really one of the big problem areas in our history. 1980s when really skyrocketing inflation, much higher even than what we're dealing with right now, double digit. So that in itself did take a long time for Volcker to unwind that. I think that's still going to continue to flow into what we're dealing here. And of course, the crypto markets really do kind of flank how this plays out. If you look at this thread right here from Alf, Macro Alf, you guys, he's been on the show a couple of times with us. We're trying to get him back on. But anyway, leading to 2000, this was in 1990 and 2000. The dot-com bubble had generated excessive risk-taking in markets. People bought anything with a dot-com, kind of like what is happening right now with crypto. People's buying anything with an ICO. Then 2000, and it wiped out the whole thing. Now, I remember, because I was there in this period of time and investing in companies and working in the tech space. We're talking about $7 trillion were essentially adjusted down in the dot bomb. So much bigger than what we're dealing with here in crypto. And even at that time, remember, regulation started to flow in a little bit on what we would see on everything from e-commerce, how companies went public. but also more importantly on the investment architecture and what investors might be able to get into, which is really what put a lot of the regulations in place for individual investors being accredited, kind of moving into this space. So does the 9902 chart remind you of something? This is the 99 right here. Boom, 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 boom. And this is kind of where people are looking. Is this the end? Are we seeing kind of just more of a pause here in the current market condition? And which is really my position, is that we are in a bit of a slight pause, from a sense of maybe being able to see what the real market data is going to be resulting in December and January, which I think is where the real critical dates are going to be more so in January, and then how that might look like in terms of a pivot. So big stuff for sure. Dollar dives in worst drop since pandemic start on the CPI price. So that's a little bit of a good thing if you think about it. But it reeled after Thursday's inflation report. Surprised traders with slower growth in prices, and then driving spec on interest rates will most likely be eased. And I think some people are now looking at December as maybe a time in which Powell could at least adjust down to a 50. Remember, we've had four 75s in a row, and adjusting down to a 50, I think, would be a soft win. Now, is that a pivot? I don't think so. And I think a lot of macro guys will agree. We have some on the show all the time. And by the way, I'd love to find out, do you guys like the macro interviews? Is this something that you like to listen in on? Make sure and smash the like button to kind of let us know. But Bloomberg's dollar spot index dropped as much as 1.9. This is the biggest intraday drop since March 2020. So this is a big one. Trading now below its 100-day moving average. Key inflation gauge right there cooled in October, which is what was more than expected. So the CPI report did offer a little bit of some price gains here. So interesting. I think this will be whether or not this is considered the slowdown and then a setup for a potential pivot. Key here, obviously, is we've got to deal with the scenario of rising prices. If we do start to see prices come down, which slightly, though we are potentially seeing a little bit of a hump in that spike of inflation. And I think this is the key now of watching the rest of the markets start to come in on these trailing indicators. This will be real estate, this will be jobs, this will be credit. Those are the big three that really play into the market going forward. A slower pace of rate hikes could curb the dollar's rally this year. This is something we've been talking about. A softer core CPI reading, leading markets, might end up giving us a little bit of move there. That's leading to further pain right now, though, in the USD. Market expectation is now showing a 50 basis point hike in December is much more likely than a 75. So that would be good. I think that is at least getting us into a very interesting spot. Now, Gareth came in. We're going to have Gareth on Monday. Gareth came in and said the markets got saved today. CPI came in a little bit lower than expected. Gives the Fed room to maybe only do a 25 in December, potentially pause after that. If that is the scenario, if that plays out in February or in December, then January could be the pause month, maybe even February, and then a pivot in March, meaning where we start to see a reduction. That is a big opportunity here. This could be a very interesting catalyst. Now, what happens between now and then? The trailing numbers and then the fourth quarter earnings are going to be my most concerning watch points. The FOMC will most likely give us a little bit of guidance on that, but it's interesting to see, Powell being so hawkish, kind of double hawkish, and then this coming in. Wouldn't he have had this kind of data and have at least some sort of indicator this might be occurring? So I think that in itself kind of presents a very interesting point that the Fed does not know what's going on. Here you got Peter Schiff. I thought I would never agree with Peter Schiff in my life, but he actually makes a very good point here. And the Fed is making no progress on reducing inflation to 2%. CPI 0.4, that's the raise. That annualizes the inflation rate of 5%. This is not good. That would not be a good thing. More than double the Fed's goal, negative real interest rates soaring, budget deficits, and now a weakening dollar will soon drive year-over-year CPI gains. This gets back to the point we just made. is a weakening dollar. Now, weakening dollar sometimes means a safe haven into other assets, including risk-on assets such as crypto. So this is kind of interesting. I know Peter obviously is looking at this from the safe haven being gold, which may also play into this. But we're going to be talking about gold and all that kind of stuff coming up. Here was a tweet by Viraj Patel. Interesting, also an interesting tweet from him. Is this the start of the Fed pivot? The breadth of the US CPI down sharply and moving back in to a level that isn't showing scary inflation. And it's interesting that you would consider 5% not scary inflation in a time in which we've had 2% or less, for quite some time. So one data point that doesn't make a trend, but the chart below shows we're moving in the right direction. So he's kind of, I'll zoom up on that for you guys just to give you a little bit of a comparison between September and October of that kind of move. So the potential is real that this could be occurring. The question is, do you think we're in a position right now where we're going to continue to see CPI prints coming down? If you feel like that is going to be the case, if we do start to see this was the high, being October and obviously now November coming up, I'm just kind of curious what you guys' thoughts are. Make sure and drop some of those in the comments over on the sidebar. We'd love to kind of address those. Now, Bitcoin and ETH both up as the inflation numbers came in. We saw a little bit of a pump. I will tell you guys this right now, spoiler alert, is that the sentiment data is still trending down on both ETH and Bitcoin. So that in itself, this may be a short-lived time. And remember, we're approaching the weekend. All things get a little bit crazy on the weekends with crypto. But there's a couple of things. Bitcoin was trading at 17.4. We saw that. It's already kind of readjusted back down. ETH rose 6% on trading up to 12.95. And obviously we saw the inflation numbers come in, which was pretty decent. But the month-on-month increase was 0.4, and I think when, again, we get back to these numbers like that, when you look at the U.S. inflation rate versus the Fed funds target rate, can we really get to a point where the Fed is going to get comfortable with this? And I think that's where we're going to see the adjustment in and to maybe a 3% inflation. If that happens, I think that completely takes the shine off of the scenario of us dealing with this. The question will then pull into the macro economy and what we're dealing with on the global conflict side, which will address whether or not we're going to have an extended recession. That's going to be the real question. Now, JPMorgan jumps in here and says, wait a minute, we think Bitcoin is still up for another crash, even though we're still in the middle of one, 13,000, obviously because of this cascade of margin calls. Now, this is the thing that I've talked about over the past few days, is that leverage and liquidity are two of the key things that we don't know where this is going to play out just yet, because there's so many things. Dominoes are dropping literally by the hour in the scenario with what's happening with FTX. So they are forecasting gloomy times right now for FTX, for Bitcoin. But the looming insolvency, FTX continues to weigh heavily on Bitcoin's price. I think this is going to continue to be the point. Whether we get a short time run here, which I fear, guys, if you do get caught in one of these, just be very cautious on any of these trades right now, because I think we're in a position where you could kind of get faked out on a little bit of a bear trap and a bull trap, I should say, to where we get a little bit of a pump, maybe an adjustment down. So one thing to be very close on and watching. Now, this is an interesting point right here that he makes. What makes this a new phase of crypto deleveraging induced by, obviously, Alameda could be, and FTX more problematic, is that the number of entities with stronger balance sheets able to rescue those with lower capital and high level is shrinking. What he simply means is normally there would be a set of suitors to come in and bail this out. That's not necessarily the case because the balance sheets have obviously taken such a hit this year of a lot of these key capital people, including even companies like Binance and Coinbase and even some of the banks that might be looking at something like this in terms of an acquisition. So right now they still are looking at the production cost stands at around 15,000, but it's likely to revisit around the 13,000 low. So we've seen that over the summer months. This is another issue that kind of plays into it. So here was Riot Blockchain, one of the largest. This is obviously Riot, one of the miners, just revealed the state of its finances and ops in the latest quarterly report. How's it going with Texas-based miner? We've already seen that some of these miners have maybe looked to the position of just taking miners offline because the cost to be able to produce is starts to fund in. That's going to cause hash rate to change. So again, getting back into some scenarios that are these ripple effects within the market could really cause these kinds of pressure points on both Bitcoin and obviously with Ethereum and ETH. All right, so I want to play a video here just quickly of Kramer. Kind of, you got to bring in Kramer. I think this is interesting. He says, I made a lot of money in Bitcoin. This is how fast he bails out of these kinds of things. And we've already seen his bad calls on so many other places. Let me play this for you guys.
Is this something you should fade, or should we switch and get a little bit more bullish, or sell into strength because it's eventually headed lower?
I was just going over with Jeff Marks, who works with me on Travel Trust, and we are going to sell some things into the opening. We do like some of the different lines that are in this, but not enough. And this kind of reaction has become very typical of an erratic market. And we frankly just don't want to wait for the next bend. You know, look, your interview with Gary Gensler was very, very dispositive. That we have $1 trillion basically that's up for grabs in a caveat emptor situation. So why not take advantage of this and do some selling?
Bitcoin too, huh?
Well, Bitcoin, I think it's been revealed as, well, let's just say that Bitcoin could fall to 12,000 without a problem. And, you know, the apologists for Bitcoin, it's really getting very thin. And Gensler basically came on and just said, look, you're on your own. And I don't want to be on my own. Now, I candidly did make a lot of money in Bitcoin. It was fool's gold. I just did it to play momentum. But I think your interview was very dispositive to getting out of all these things. And this may be a really tricky.
All right, so I'm going to pause it there, but you guys kind of get the framework here. I mean, this is how waffling Kramer gets on these things. And I think everybody kind of in the own community, we've seen his bad calls in everything from securities and all that kind of stuff. The point he's making, though, I think is interesting in the sense that he's looking at Gensler's address that was today about where the status of regulation might fall and also just how the crypto markets might come in here. But this whole point of you're on your own, I think what they're looking at, and when you look at the general of the market itself, this is a very early market. It's obviously in these kinds of pains. Growing pains. I do agree that I think there's going to be some scenarios that play out this in the regulation. Again, a lot of this is chess plays right now that are being done both by DC, but also by what's happening within the greater capital markets, which will really play into this in the near future. He's going to turn his tide the minute that we start seeing banks such as Fidelity and many others start to move in this direction. All of a sudden, his face will be, just mark my words, go ahead and cut this piece right here, play back in about a year, is that, oh, now banks and everybody, oh, it's much more secure now. It's the same scenario. All we're dealing with is some different players that might fall under regulatory guidelines that could be, and I agree, could be in a much better position, especially around the exchanges and stable coins. So that brings me into this right here, and that is Maxine Waters comes in and says, urgent need for legislation after the FTX. You definitely don't want Aunt Maxine on your case. She's something else. Urgent need for legislation. Chair of the House Financial Services Committee. She's the right kind of person that would bring this to the light. Now more than ever, clear major consequences. Yep. This week's news further highlights the urgent need for legislation. I do think this will put a little bit of a fire into DC and the likelihood of a potential talking point and potential positioning point from the stump in the sense of where the administration is going to go, but also more importantly, how this may play out in the 2024 election, because this is going to get interesting for sure, especially in 2023 of how regulation may fall. I think that they're going to be in a position where they could put some stuff in terms of regulation guidelines into the issues around the exchanges themselves, which I think is healthy. And then, of course, that would also move into stablecoins. And it will be the primary thing that has always been in these regulatory write-ups that we've seen so far from Loomis and Gillibrand and many of the others. You know, we even had Tom Emmers on our show talking about this very point, and that is exchanges will be expected for full audit capabilities and no funny money. You know, so that's something I think that is healthy. The fact that Gensler is kind of already out there kind of feathering this as hey, you're gonna, don't worry about it. This is what you should expect. It almost looks as if he's kind of phoning it in at this point. I wonder if he thinks he's going to be start in a position where he'd be booted out of this situation, especially if he loses this case with XRP. Be interesting. But here's the White House now monitoring the FTX implosion, calls for more crypto regulation. Again, you get Biden into this, and he's already moved into this position before, but now they're renewing its call for more rules around cryptocurrencies. And currently, the administration consistently maintained that without proper oversight, there's going to be risk. And I think these risk aspects are still a common aspect of risk as we see a lot of these emerging markets start to explode, including what we'll see in Web3 and others. So this is all going to start to eventually roll out into some other aspects. Remember, the internet was essentially kind of the same thing before we started seeing, updates in new regulatory federal guidelines around what you could do within the open web. So interesting scenario here. The most recent news further underscores these concerns, highlights by prudent regulation of cryptocurrencies is needed, indeed needed. And this came over from Jean-Pierre over there. All right, further into this is Bitcoin miners could be also the next trigger. This is another big factor that starts to play into the tone here. Cash outflows hit multi-month highs. This is a problem I think that we're going to try to have Sue Ennis on. Hopefully she'll get a chance to talk about this with HUD 8. They're one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin out there for sure. But if you look at the conditions, the network conditions will strangle miners. With this kind of fall, this was a 20% move, all right? Miners began operating at higher cost than block subsidiary and transaction fees that they earned. This is a problem. This results in mining rigs going idle and then miners selling Bitcoin to cover expenses. This is a problem that would be a huge situation. So it is one of those scenarios. I've talked with Sue about this before. One of the things they pointed out in this article was that from a miner, while it's passing 5,400 Bitcoin from November 9th alone, which now can be interpreted as increasing selling pressure. So there's some issues where there are some selling pressures that could play into this. That again is another catalyst here, along with the things that we don't know about what the FTX fallout will truly be. I think regulation, that's months, if not maybe even years away, if we continue to see this pace. So I think what's going to happen here is the real question is how the fallout affects the rest of the market, how CPI plays into this, and how the Fed pivot comes around. Because I think all of those will contribute to other aspects of players coming into the market. And then, of course, the existing players getting stronger in the market, whether it's companies like Coinbase, Binance, Robinhood, or some of these others that are really kind of playing in a position to pick up the scraps from FTX. Here is where it gets into interesting waters. Tether freezes 46 million of FTX's USDT, which is another new precedence happening. This is actually because of U.S. regulators coming in and potentially causing some issues here. So that in itself is, and some people would consider that be enough to kind of consider, situations with Tether itself, but also with what is this going to affect if this is being frozen, and where does this roll out into the market? Because most likely there's going to be damage and maybe some rollout issues around other organizations. Amid rumors of insolvency and worries about the financial conditions of Alameda, we would like to take first and foremost act as a mouthpiece for the entire crypto industry and reiterate that one crisis does not make an industry. Now, I think that is a situation that everybody's trying to make a statement on now, is that these kinds of bad actors, they're in all markets. Yes, it's unfortunate because our market, when I say our market, the crypto market in general is so much smaller. So these are magnified and they feel much larger than what most people would see if you saw this in a traditional banking market. So it is something to kind of compare to, I think, when you kind of look at it, because this, to me, is a situation where if you kind of compare to what the traditional finance has, so many similarities here, and it's not anything that I'm surprised about. Here coming over from Zero Hedge, gets worse. Alameda bought up and acquired 70% of USDT Tether. This could get even more systemic very, very quick if Tether gets into it. So I'm curious, guys, are you looking at holding Tether right now? Is this something that you're going to say, listen, I'm continuing to move to cash, or I'm continuing to move to Bitcoin? What is it that you're playing for a safe haven right now, but yet still being in the right position to be able to get into the market and make a trade? Love to get your input on that. Make sure and smash the like button too, because it does help others kind of discover this content and learn a lot more about what's happening out there in the market. Last point here is some crypto analysts now update an outlook on Bitcoin, and Solana says that that some of these are kind of looking still okay. So I think we're still Bitcoin. We may see a recovery from the exchange-driven market crash if it breaches the 18,150 mark. I think this is going to be a hard one to hit. It'll be interesting if something changes in the market, but if you can get back into this zone here in the 19,000, we're going to go and push up the price after that. I just don't think this will work. In my opinion on this is that sentiment is still pushing down. We don't necessarily know the complete fallout. There needs to, even though with CPI, which is really kind of a shining light right now, is that some people will look at this, but the problem is damage has already been done. And the fallout component here, again, gets back to liquidity and also into the leverage aspect. So I still feel that we are in a position where we could see some trouble. He does go on to say here, BNB still looking strong, and BNB ETH. I just did a little BNB Bitcoin bot trade that we were working with on Pionex, and was actually pretty fun. It was pretty fun and a good experiment. You know, we'll try things like this all the time on things like bot trades, and it worked out pretty well. It was a nice little 10% move. So, but I'm just seeing this kind of moves in the market right now, still just at the point we're dealing with. These are small swing trades, or you're not in the market trading at all on this. Maybe you're looking at strictly dollar cost averaging, or you're looking at a handful of tokens in the altcoin space that maybe you're saying, hey, this might be the sale price for me, and I'm jumping into those. So Solana might be one of those, because it is the one that could be in a very deep move. Here's Arthur Hayes saying that Solana could get down to 3, Ethereum around 750. And just remember, Arthur Hayes also was the guy who made the statement earlier that after post-ETH merge, we would see a $3,000 Ethereum. So take that with a grain of salt as you start to look at some of these things. But interesting stuff. This was his tweet right here. CV comes in hot, 7 or 8. Expect TradFi to puke into the weekend. Crypto will make another stab lower, and it's possible. So obviously we know what that did, and that was not necessarily the case. So we might be seeing a little bit of a fluctuation. So we'll get into some questions here. I know you guys had some other stuff here. I think I had one more thing. Yeah, oh, this was a point right here from Mr. Whale. Ethereum held in FTX's main wallet had dropped from 322K to 32K. So that's a big one at one point. But it's still not a massive amount. I mean, it is big. Don't get me wrong. That 322K is a ton in terms of ETH. So, but still bleeding at about 500 ETH per minute right now. I guess that is a little bit crazy for sure. All right, last up here, do not forget, a lot of these guys are getting hurt and hammered. This was Anthony Scaramucci that was kind of pointing at Bitcoin at 100K by end of year. Still crazy. This was back in August. So again, just shows you, remember Scaramucci was and Skybridge Capital was the company that FTX was starting to invest in. So I think, you know, a lot of scenarios playing out in this one for sure. Let's jump over to the poll today and take a look. All right, Bitcoin to 13K. Yes, you guys are thinking straight. I think you are in the range, and that's really where I'm looking. I think we are going to see some slight moves. Yes, there might be some good trades in here, shorts or longs, that could play into this. But if you're in a position that you're doing spots, you're looking for those days. Just like yesterday, you were able to grab maybe a 16K Bitcoin. Kudos to you. You did something that's out there and it's perfect for dollar cost averaging. Where are we right now? I'll pull up the charts. In the meantime, I know you guys are probably wanting to take a little bit of sentiment view. We'll take a look at that as well and get into some questions. In the meantime, let's take a look at the questions here. Sol will go under $10 on the next dive down. I agree with you, Crypto Rocker. I think Sol is one of those that is going to be a little bit of a trouble. Some play here. Kevin O'Leary, FTX ambassador just 1 year ago. A big player needs to go to zero. Woo. Yeah, I know, right? And he said that. It was unfortunate that it was his player that was going to zero. Not a good one. Ian McKay comes in. Gary Gillen wants DeFi gone. What do you think him and Sam Bankman-Fried were colluding about? Man, you guys are on it today. I mean, listen, this is just bad guy with bad guy. What's normal? Do you not realize that bad guys kind of congregate together? It kind of is the thing. Super chats coming in. Thank you. Be careful with Saturday, man. I got that one. I wish you all stuff. I hope the bounce back in the last dump. I wish you good luck. Yeah, thanks, man. We appreciate that. Miners will just sell a little at a time. They won't do a dump on the market all at once. Agreed, because that would definitely cause some ripple effects in the market. Hill Dog coming in with will investors like Kevin O'Leary keep Bitcoin from going lower than 13K? I don't know. I don't know if they can. Some of these, this is the scenario. I mean, I saw a tweet just the other day, that was just simple. Is Saylor okay, or did someone check on Saylor? Kind of an interesting point. But my point is that some of these could just get liquidated, and that is the more concerning factor if we do start to see this move down. Again, this goes back into more of the effect that comes out from the fallout. This is the point that it really has not been revealed just yet. A lot more fallout here for sure. What about Voyager now? Voyager is screwed. Just simple. I mean, because we talked about this yesterday. Voyager is screwed because you got basically a bankrupt company being now trusteed by another soon-to-be bankrupt company. Not going to happen for sure. I know we have another poll up here. Let's take a look here. All right, Soul Bottom, 10%, $10, 29. Ooh, everybody's pushing down. Wow, this is crazy. Man, Soul is just really taking a monster, face plant right now. Your thoughts on how long we're looking to get more info on other firms affected? I think we'll know by next week this time. We will have a really good snapshot. The industry will know where it is. And I think by mid next week, we'll most likely see some adjustments on the market. We could see a little bit of sideways action here, maybe a little bit of a dip on the weekend. And I was going to pull up sentiment for you guys just to give you a little bit here. And I know you asked about Matic. Let me pull up Matic as well. Hang on just a second. We'll pull that for you and get it rolling. And I'll jump back over here to Matic real quick. I'm doing all this on the fly here, guys. If you're listening on the podcast, you're missing all this great work. All right, so here was Matic on its adjustment. Did anybody grab any at 90 cents, 89 cents on Thursday? And did anybody grab right here on Wednesday? Kind of curious if anybody was grabbing in there, because that's a nice move. If you were in a short trade, a little swing trade, that's a very good move back up to $1.12. So Matic's in good position right now. Now, I do know that Matic came in positive on sentiment today. Bitcoin came in slightly negative on sentiment, which I would say is correct because Bitcoin kind of waffling right here. ETH also slightly negative, also waffling for sure. AVAX came in positive on sentiment. We've seen a little bit of correction here with AVAX. And then also Cardano, ironically, came in on positive sentiment. So this is an interesting one that I'm watching very closely too, is ADA. All right, thanks for the super chat. SBF, yep, snakes in the grass for sure. When will ETH go down? Again, I think ETH is so closely tied to this issue because of liquidity issues. And when I say this issue with FTX, I'm going to talk to Ran from Crypto Banner tomorrow. We're going to have him on the show. And I'd like to know that because, I think Ran will understand a little bit more around where this flow of impact, these ripple effects could have on the market long term. And it'll be interesting. I think that'll be a good conversation. So make sure and stay tuned or jump in on that. I think we're going to do it with him at the 3 o'clock live. So we'll let you guys know tomorrow. Polkadot. Let's take a look here. DOT was slightly flat on sentiment and is moving up just slightly on a correction here at 591. So not bad there. Your thoughts on the Gemini exchange? All right, so listen, full disclosure, I use Gemini. I have used it. They're pretty decent. The question to me is liquidity. And are they affected in any way? Now, I know, the Winklevosses kind of came out. They haven't really come out and said they aren't. I don't know if anybody's caught that yet or not. I'll make sure and get our research team to start soon to just looks at that. I like Gemini as a company, but it doesn't matter if you like these guys as a company if, in fact, they have these problems with these connected issues with FTX. That's the concern that the entire market has right now, including Crypto.com and others that and Crypto.com is not one I like. It's just not an exchange that we've tried it, we've played with it. At one time, I felt like it had some potential, but it really, when they started doing a lot of the jockeying with credit cards and yields and all these restrictions on withdrawals and scenarios like that within the account itself, it started getting a little bit too sketchy because all these things were happening. And sometimes you just have to kind of go gut check on these things. When you start feeling like this ain't really cool, then you probably have something. Chainlink versus Matic. Well, Matic is flying right now. Chainlink I just sold earlier in the week. But if you look at Link right now, it's adjusted up a little bit. I think long term for me, I would look at Matic more so. This is going to be a nice little move right here as Atom. It's been on the move right here. We saw this coming yesterday with a pretty good bottom out on sentiment, and this morning's sentiment was good on Cosmos. Let me look at Cosmos's run since Wednesday right there. What are we? Yeah, nice 28%. There's some altcoin moves out there, guys, being made, so good for you. Doge came back almost 20%, which is good. Quant even came in at 13% on another kind of sideways move, but interesting stuff here. And then let's see, what else did we have? Oh, people always ask me about H-bar. So H-bar, again, this one was a surprise for us because we had this as flat sentiment, and this one was moving up. So interesting stuff. Algorand, like the project, definitely. We've had them on our show before. I think they're one of the actual real projects out there that are going to be around. Will USDD be able to maintain a peg value of Solana, Tron? Well, that'll be one of the questions, and also one of the issues that jump back. So some good stuff coming in. JPMorgan says it's staying in, probably going up. Then it's probably going. It's saying then it's probably going up for sure. Yeah, I think that's some of the case. For sure. 50, man, there's a lot of questions you guys got coming in. Listen, the key here is be cautious in all your situations out there. Do not panic sell in any kind of situation unless you are just in a bad scenario with leverage, things like that play into this. But right now, there's probably some opportunities here. You just have to understand where you're willing to go on long term. That really is kind of it. The other thing that you should always be doing, again, self-custody, practice it. It's really good for you. All right, I think that's going to wrap it for the day. Make sure if you're not in our Diamond Circle, get in because it's a free newsletter to you. It also drops additional content that we don't put here on the channel. And it's really kind of the way to stay in touch with what we're doing. And when we're feeding out stuff so quickly, sometimes you just might miss it on YouTube, but you catch it in your email. Oh yeah, I need to watch that, and we'll catch it. And we got a lot coming in there. So really cool stuff. Catch it. Just click the link below. You'll be able to get into it, and it's free. If you guys want to reach me, it's out there on Twitter right now, @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.